In our morning show, everybody. Now we are going to be speaking about a very important topic that is happening right in the Caribbean here, a little bit north, and to be exact, in Cuba. We're going to be chatting with Her Excellency Tania Diego Olite, who is the Cuban ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago, about the Cuban crisis. Good morning, Ambassador.
Yes, good morning. Good morning to everyone today. Thank you very much for this invitation.
And thank you for joining us this morning. And in our interview, we're going to disseminate some of the information surrounding the protests happening in Cuba, some of the reasons behind it, and the government's stance as well. So my first question is: the protest started on July 11th. What was the match or rally that started that fire of a protest? What was the last thing that happened that caused the protest itself?
Well, in Cuba, we are in the middle of a political and mediatic operation against our country, financed and orchestrated, organized in the United States. We have evidence of having all this operation in social media that I can explain you later. So we are in stability, in a normal situation in our country. There has been a few disturbs, a few acts in 10 municipalities of our country, more or less. And there has been a combine of situations that we could explain, of course. One part, we have the pandemic pike. As all the countries have, one way or the other, we have been able to delay this pandemic pike until this moment. We also have been in the middle of this situation. We have been also experimenting a recruitment of the blockade of the United States against Cuba. We have been, for example, have received during the Trump administration, there has been applied towards Cuba 243 new measures to recruit the blockade. 55 of them has been during the pandemic. So in the middle of this, we have been also doing a lot of efforts in order to develop the vaccines, the candidate vaccines. As you may know, I explained, it's knowledge of people that Cuba has developed 5 candidate vaccines. One of them is already approved by the National Authority Regulator body. So we are with this candidate, with this vaccine, the first Latin American and Caribbean country we have that has its own vaccines. We are planning to have around 70% of the population vaccinated after the summer, and at the end of the year, the plan is to have all the population of Cuba vaccinated. But this process, these efforts, not only of having the vaccines and develop all these medicines, and because it's not only the vaccines, there are also some medicines that we have been developing, requires a lot of efforts, a lot of resources, and we have been having problems to access to the raw material to produce it, the vaccines and also the medicines. We have been also having, as other countries in the world, the impact of the diminishing of tourism in the economy, and also the international economic environment that is very, very complicated to other countries. So with this situation, and also precisely because one of the measures has been trying to avoid that Cuba can access to the oil in the country, and also with problem accessing to the spare parts of the power plants, we also had in the last 15 or 2 weeks before these disturbs, we have problems with that, blackouts, and all that together. And an operation that has been instigating and orchestrating these storms in Cuba had as a result this situation. Cuba is in stability. The Cuban revolutionary people went to streets on the same Sunday night and also in Monday in order to defend the revolution. So we can explain all the other questions you would like about this, but we would like to focus this to put it in the exact context, because as I said at the beginning, there has been a mediatic and political operation orchestrated towards Cuba, especially in the social media. Social media, we can give you a lot of examples of fake news that are circulating about Cuba, and we have evidence. The Minister of Foreign Relations of Cuba has denounced our evidence of how has been used high technologies, very expensive technology that is not reachable for everyone normally. I mean, there are funds behind that in order to create, for example, with robots and trolls, a lot of tweets with labels like SOSQ or humanitarian intervention and all that, trying to get this idea precisely, the idea that Cuba is in crisis, and is a reality that you cannot see in Cuba images regarding the COVID-19, for example, images of people dying in the hospital or in the streets. We have that pandemic under control. You cannot see any other countries of the third world as we are vaccinating all the population. You don't see also any kind of reprehension as you can see in many other countries with the police force and the anti-riot teams, or launching tears gases, and so the point I would like to remark in the beginning of this interchange, this conversation, is precisely that there is a mediatic operation in the social media, more specific, although we have seen also in TV, there are some, there has been people manifestations, a lot of manifestations to support the revolution, and in TV there has been able to overshadow the signs that people are having in these manifestations of support of the revolution. So there are certain TV channels that have overshadowed the content of that signs in order to present that manifestation as against the government. So well, there has been a lot of misinformation, really.
Ambassador, sorry. You spoke to many of the topics with regard to, which is consistent with the government rhetoric in Cuba. Now, what proof does the government have, and the proof that the government can show the world that all of these social media videos and things that are, well, supposedly being put out by the people in Cuba who are on the street going through that situation, what proof does the government have to show the world that these things are false and all those things are fake news? Because as we understand, there are other critics and others outside of the rhetoric of the government that have put out information that says to the contrary of what we've been speaking about for the past few minutes. So what proof does the government have?
Yes, well, there are a lot of proofs. There are circulating example of those fake news. There has been pictures of things that if if this weren't so dangerous, it will move to laugh. For example, there has been images of the Argentina celebrating in Buenos Aires the victory in the America's Cup of the people in Buenos Aires. A lot of people in the street with joy celebrating that. And that same picture has been put in some media and also in these social medias with the foot page, I mean, in the picture, saying that those peoples are against the government in Cuba. There has been using pictures of Barcelona, Alexandria in Egypt, with a lot of people in the streets, and they have been saying that it's in Cuba. There is also evidence that our minister has denounced the creation of a company in Miami on June 15 with funds of the State Department of the state of Florida that was certified on June 15 to receive funds in order to do this operation. There are proof with commercial tools that there are in the media to count the tweeters, and there are commercial tools for do that, that reveals clearly that it's not possible for one person, human person, to do more than 6 retweets in 1 second. So there are also evidences that the geolocation of the accounts, a lot of accounts, has been changed in order to give the idea that these accounts are from Cuba. So it's a cyber war, and there are powerful instruments used in these cyber wars against our country, and it is being used in other opportunities and other times in the interest, hegemonic interest, and it's something that there are evidence of that, a lot of evidence of that.
Ambassador, tell us about the effect of the U.S. sanctions that are placed on Cuba and have been for quite some time.
Yes, we have 60 years of a blockade against our country, but not only the amount of money that it has represented to our countries in all these years. That is very, very important, and it's in all the sectors of our economy. We've been overcoming despite that. But also in these last years, and specifically in the pandemic times, the United States has put in 55 new measures in the middle of the pandemic. Cuba hasn't been able to access, for example, to ventilators, long-form ventilators, because of that. Cuba has been also a few days before leaving the government, the previous government of Trump has put our country just a few days before leaving to put obstacles in the reviewing of the policy towards Cuba, has unjustly and with any fundament includes our country in the list of countries that supposedly sponsor terrorism. So everyone knows Cuba, everyone knows that it's a lie. Anyhow, that measures implies difficulties for Cuba to access to loans, in the financial transaction, there are many difficulties to our country. So despite all the COVID problems that has bringing to all the countries in the world, and specifically to countries like ours, like some countries in the Caribbean that had a lot of income from tourism, we have also the recruitment, the cruel and opportunistic blockade against our country. The government of the United States has used the virus as an ally in order to defeat the revolution, to defeat the social system that we have. It's precisely this social system we have, socialism, is precisely that, because the reason why the powerful health system we have, is the reason why we have been able to have this attention to patients of COVID-19. It's the reason why we have been able to develop the vaccines. So it's a problem of trying to defeat the revolution, and I encourage people, I encourage the viewing public to analyze well the information they receive, to be better informed, to compare, to know better the reality of Cuba, because the misinformation campaign is huge.
Thank you for that, Ambassador. And before we go, as I understand, the Cuban government has refused the COVID-19 vaccines from the COVAX facility. Was there a specific reason for that? And would it not have been beneficial to the Cuban people if the Cuban government's stance was to accept the vaccines from the COVAX facility?
Well, it's a very hypocrite movement or to think that the solution to the problems in Cuba will be that. I mean that every person that has any concern, any worry about Cuba, about the suffering of the people economically with this situation, has enough reason, the most important reason, and have enough elements to demand the lifting of the blockade and the lifting of all the measures that have been applying towards Cuba. It's not have to be. I mean, it depends on a will to do it, because the real fact is that we have in this very moment more than 8 million people's 8 million doses of vaccines has been injected. I think put it in the Cuban people. More than 2 million people already have been vaccinated. So we are also doing researches to develop the pediatric vaccines. We are also doing that. So there is also a vaccines, the nasal vaccine, one of the few in the world that are going to be put to the people that are convalescent from COVID-19. So the real solution to the situation in Cuba, the real commitment towards the people of Cuba is lifting the blockade and letting the people of Cuba to develop, to continue with the system, social system that with sovereignty have chosen to our country, that people have voted to our country. So that's the real impact to the Cuban people, to let us to develop ourselves, not to put additional obstacles to our country. That's the real help. That vaccines can be sent also to Caribbean countries or to other countries. For example, those countries who doesn't have access at all to the vaccines, or those countries who would like to vaccines the pediatric population that one vaccines in United States has already this possibility approved. We are working on that. Some other people has not the slightest possibility to have access, not only pediatric vaccines, but also vaccines to their own people. So these are that's the facts. That's the facts. Right. Those are the facts. Sorry.
I want to thank you so much for your time this morning, Ambassador, Your Excellency, for giving us this information and clearing up maybe some misinformation that has been out there. So I do wish you have a great day. Continue to be safe, and thank you for joining us this morning. All right, that's the Cuban ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago, Her Excellency Tania Diego Olite, who was just giving us some information about the crisis in Cuba and what has been put out on social media versus what is actually happening on the ground. So you could also look back on that interview, get more information, and do your own research as well to see where your stance is. With that, we're going to take a short break and come back with much more.